going to tell you a story about how the huge changes in international politics can affect one small, slightly strange-looking, unique antelope species. It's a species that I've had the privilege of working on for more than 20 years, and I was working on it when things started to go wrong, and for it, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and I saw its population crash, and I've been helping in the fight to restore it. So although this story is about one antelope species in one place in the world, I think it actually illustrates general things about how politics and social change can affect conservation and how scientists can help us to turn things around. Oops. So first of all, what is a saiga? I hope that's the first question in your mind, and where do they live? So saigas are a very strange-looking, unique creature that was a contemporary of mammoths and saber-toothed cats living on the wide steppes of Eurasia just after the Ice Age. Unlike mammoths and saber-toothed cats, they still live on the wild steppes of Eurasia. You can see up there, there's a photo here that was taken this spring in Kazakhstan of a herd of saigas. So, as you can see from my model over there, in the summer they're a kind of tan colour, and in the winter they've got a big white fluffy coat, and they've got a very strange bulbous nose. So at the moment there's about 5 populations in the world. There are 5 populations in the world. So there's a different subspecies that lives in Mongolia. There's only a few thousand of them. And then most of the saigas live in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Russia. You can see their range sizes are pretty big. Kazakhstan's an enormous country, and this is the range of the saiga. They can migrate up to 1,000 kilometers north to south each year. So they go north up here to check out the best grass in the summer, and then they go south in the winter to escape from all the heavy snow that's in the north. This population here, that I'll be talking about a bit later, migrates into Uzbekistan from Kazakhstan in the winter. So how did I start getting involved in saigas? So in 1988, I came to Imperial College London to do my PhD. The PhD was on elephants and rhinos, and it was on the ecology and the effect of the international trade on those species. But I'd always had a dream to go to Russia. It was always somewhere that was romantic, something that I wanted to go to see. When I found out about this very obscure species called the saiga that is used in traditional Chinese medicine for the same things as rhinos, I thought, aha, this is my chance to go to Russia as well. So I wrote a research proposal that said, I'm working on rhinos, I want to work on saigas because they do the same thing. So that's what I did. In 1990, I went to Russia, had a look at some saigas, and fell in love with the species, the place, the people, and I've been working on it ever since. So a lot of the things that I did in the time, at least early on, was ecological research about the saigas. And I'm just going to give you one example of the research that I did about the saiga. So, if you're a saiga or a red deer, something which has harems that the males have to defend, then as a male, it's really important to be very big, because if you're not very big, you can't fight off the other males. And so, if you're a mum with an embryo inside you, what you really need to do is invest as much energy as you can in making your male really big if you've got a male baby inside you. If you've got a female, it doesn't really matter. They get mated anyway. It's not such a bother. So there's no point in putting lots of effort into making a nice big female. It doesn't make any difference. So that's the theory. That's the ecological theory. But very few people have tested that theory in practice. And so we set out to test it with saigas, and they either have singles or twins. So if you look at the graph up there, this one here, this is the sex of the baby inside the mother, female, male, a female baby with a sister, a female baby with a brother, a male with a sister, a male with a brother. So you can see, first of all, our ecological theories proved right in the singletons, because male babies or male fetuses are much bigger than female ones, because the females are investing in the next generation by making their males good to fight. Nobody ever knew what would happen if you had twins. Can the females distinguish between what kind of sex they've got when they've got mixed sexes in their womb? That might be quite difficult, because how do you allocate resources to a male or a female fetus when they're both in the womb together? So we had a look, and you can see that the females, they're pretty tiny, these female twins, and they're pretty much the same size whether they've got a brother or a sister in with them. The interesting thing is with the male ones, and you can see that if you've got a brother, you're really much, much bigger than if you've got a sister. So maybe females can't really distinguish when there's a sister. They can't put as much resources into the brother as they might want to. The other thing that's really interesting, worth noting about this, is if you think about saigas, they are nomadic species that wander for hundreds of kilometers across the steppe when they're pregnant. And the babies have to start running after about 2 days. They can't hang around on the steppe because a wolf will come and eat them. And so what the females do is they invest a lot in their offspring, and pretty much up to the limit. In fact, they have the biggest babies, or the biggest investment in their embryos of any ungulate. So 70% of their female body mass on average is a baby at birth. That's pretty heavy. The biggest ones, the super mums, who've got 2 males inside them, 30% of her body mass is baby when she's dropping it. That's quite something when she's trying to run on the steppe and get away from a wolf. So that's some ecological research, and for the first time we showed that it's a bit hard to distinguish in the womb between a male and a female and to invest properly in the males. While I was doing this kind of research, the Soviet Union broke down. So in 1991, it broke up, and then in the 1990s, everything went a bit wrong in these countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. There were kind of 3 interlinked things that happened that had an effect on saigas. So the first thing is that saiga horns are used in Chinese medicine, like I said. They're used at similar things to rhino horn. Here's some saiga horns that I found in a shop in China. I'll show you very beautifully what they look like. So translucent. You can come down at the end and have a look if you like. So when the Soviet Union broke up, the border with China opened, and for the first time in 70 years since the Soviet Union, people could go and sell saiga horn. It became really valuable, like $400 per kilo. Per kilo, which is only 3 saigas. This is the kind of thing. They put it in tea, and it's good for liver, blood diseases, that kind of thing, apparently. So there was a trade in saiga horn again. You could make a lot of money from selling saiga horn. Secondly, socio-ecological collapse, socio-economic collapse. There was no money invested in the rural areas anymore. This is a village that I went to see in about 1990, and it was a nice, thriving village. This is a few years later when my PhD student went to see it. Most people had left, and those who were left had no jobs. And the third thing that happened was that there was no money for saiga conservation anymore from the state because they were too busy trying to get up on their feet again. No money for management, no money for protection. So here's the result. You can see along here, this is the saiga population in Kazakhstan, kind of pottering about around 1 million in the 1980s. At this point here, this is when there was no money for monitoring anymore, so we had 4 years without any data. After the 4 years ended, the saiga population had halved, and it kept on halving every year for 5 years, till it got down to its lowest point of 50,000 animals, down from over 1 million in just 5 years. That was pretty scary. And that was happening while I was there doing my ecological research. Another thing that happened, remember I said that males have to fight for their females. Because the horns are only borne by males and they were targeted for Chinese medicine, people were out selecting for males, trying to catch males, not females. They took the females as well for meat, but the males particularly valuable. So what happened was that the sex ratio got lower and lower. So normally you get about 25% adult males in a population of saigas, and you get males having harems of between 12 and 30 females, and that's fine. In 2001 in Russia, there was 1 male for 109 females. Now, however good you are at breeding, that's a bit of an ask. Okay, so you can see the outcome here. This is the proportion of females pregnant in Russia there. And you can see in the early 90s, it was 100% really. They were pretty much all pregnant. And this is the year in which it got down to a really low number of males. There were only 20% of the females got pregnant that year. So that was a bit of a disaster. Here's some more data, similar data from Kazakhstan from a little bit later. This is from the birth areas, so where the females go to give birth. So I said they normally have singletons or twins, and pretty much all of them have that. So you'd expect at least a 1-to-1 ratio of females to calves. What you see here is many fewer calves than females. So again, they're not getting pregnant. So that was just another issue that came to the poor saigas. So what happened next? Well, we've been doing all this research and gathering evidence, so the most important thing to do as a scientist when you've done that is to publish it, to get it out into the public domain so people can act on it. So that was what we did. We published the data, and we alerted the World Conservation Union, IUCN, which does the red lists of threatened mammals, that says animals, that shows the most threatened things on the planet. So saigas went from not being threatened in 2001 to being critically endangered. That's the top level. It's like you're single going in straight in at number 1. Very rare. We're not proud, obviously. But anyway, it went straight in as critically endangered onto the IUCN Red List. This species that nobody had really ever heard of suddenly became quite talked about in international circles. And there were resolutions passed at UN congresses and things like that. And there was some money put forward by some of the big NGOs towards restoration of saigas in one of the populations, which is pretty much the only population that is now recovering. So we raised the alarm, basically. So what do you do when you've raised the alarm? You're trying to do something to help. Conservation doesn't really work if all you do is guard things. It particularly doesn't work if you... particularly doesn't work if it's something like the saiga that lives in remote areas, far away, very large areas. You can't have guards putting a fence around saigas because they migrate away. You need to get the local people on side. You need to actually get people not wanting to poach anymore, but instead wanting to help to save saigas, because otherwise it's not going to work. You can't do it just by force. So we spent quite a long time, from 2003-04 onwards, asking local people what they knew about saigas, what they knew about their declines, and why they were poaching. So everyone knew that saigas were declining. We went to villages in all 3 countries that we work in, and we asked the people there, why are the saigas declining? So there's a list of reasons up here. It's a bit small, you can't really see. This dark one here is poaching, and these are other things. And what you can see is the poaching is pretty much overwhelmingly what people say. So people knew that poaching was the cause. Okay, so why are people poaching? The next thing we did was we asked people to list all the things that you can do in the village, all the kind of jobs, the livelihoods that you can have in a village. This is the list. And then we asked them to rank them under different kinds of dimensions. So prestige, physical risk, profit, and danger as well. We ranked them all, and then we made a ranking here. And you can see here, farming is the one that everyone likes to do, farming, administration, that kind of thing, nice, easy jobs. Poaching is down here. Yeah, right at the bottom. This one's housework, so poaching is only just better than being female. So people didn't want to poach. Next thing we did was living in the village for a little while, starting to get a hang of who was a poacher and who wasn't a poacher, so that we could try to understand what makes someone a poacher or not. Here's some family snaps that we took from family albums of some poachers. You can see them out enjoying themselves by the sea. So what we found out from our statistical models was that poachers were young men who were poor, unemployed, and had a motorbike. And you need a motorbike because that's how you kill saigas, you chase them on the steppe. So now we had a pretty clear idea of who was poaching and why they were poaching. It was poverty. We also found out, and we found that out consistently through all our questionnaire surveys we've done over many years in different countries, that people care about saigas. They value them as part of their cultural heritage. So people are very unkeen on the idea of saigas going extinct. They want to help, and that's true whether they're poachers or not, actually. And here's a really nice picture. This is taken from Russia, from southern Russia, from a place called Kalmykia, which is the only Buddhist state in Europe. And this is a local god called the White Old Man, and by his side is a saiga. See there? So they see saigas as part of their nomadic heritage and part of their cultural heritage. And this was built in about 2004, this temple. So there's a lot to work with in terms of people being interested in saigas and saiga conservation. So, first thing we did was to start to work with children. Why do you work with children? Because they're interested, they're engaged, they're interested in conservation, they're the next generation, they're people who are keen to get involved. But also, importantly, when you have a festival or something like that for a child, their parents come along, their grandparents might come, the village officials might come, the government officials might come. Lots of people come along, and they also get involved, and they also find out about saigas. So we've been running Saiga Day since 2008, first in Uzbekistan, and then in Kazakhstan and Russia. And in fact, today, there's a Saiga Day going on somewhere out there in Russia or Kazakhstan. So you can feel part of it a little bit. And we have art competitions. This 8-year-old has done a brilliant picture there. We have theatre, quizzes, football, poetry readings, traditional dance, all sorts of stuff that children like at Saiga Day. We've also been doing step wildlife clubs. This is quite a new invention, which is when you, the children have it as an after-school activity, and we've been investing a lot in educational materials for their teachers. Because at the moment, all the children in these remote areas, they're learning about polar bears and penguins and tigers. They're not learning about their own wildlife because there's no teaching materials about their own wildlife. So we've been giving them educational materials that allow them to teach about their own heritage. You can see here, this is a mural that one of our people did this year with their own wildlife on it for the children. So Step Wildlife Club's really good. That's their logo. And yeah. It's all very well engaging children, working with people, getting people all excited with their clubs, but if people are poaching because they're poor, that's not going to help. People are going to be enthused and keen, but they can't change anything because they're poor. So the other thing we started to do was to start thinking about how can you improve people's income so they don't need to poach anymore. And that was also important because we wanted to make sure that people didn't think we were coming into their country only caring about saigas and not caring about their welfare when they were really quite suffering quite badly under the breakup of the Soviet Union. So this is our first project. It's called Rotating Cows. And it came out of that analysis I said before that said that people really wanted to be farmers. And also finding out that poor families like these guys, all they need is one decent cow. This is a local breed of cow. And the veterinary support, the shelter, the food for that, and that's enough to bring them out of poverty. So we gave them some of these cows, we gave them the support. This was done by the Centre for Wild Animals, our partner in Kalmykia, which is our breeding centre. Really successful, people loved it, but there was no money to carry it on. So we needed something a bit more self-sustaining. So the next thing we did, which started in 2008, is in Uzbekistan, and this is using embroidery as an alternative livelihood, so targeting women. So the people who live in northern Uzbekistan, where the saigas live, are from the Karakalpak ethnic group, and they're very proud of their embroidery traditions, and here's some, you can come down and see them later. They do beautiful, intricate designs. But the older women were worried that people were losing the tradition and that the children weren't picking it up. So we helped them to start embroidery clubs to teach these traditions to their teenage girls, and also give them a stable market, a more reliable market from the international market, and a market that was giving them a better price. And that was great, it was very popular. The idea for this, so you might think, why doing embroidery for women, is that going to have any effect on poaching? Because that's done by men for completely different reasons. And this is our idea about how that worked. So, saiga meat is cheaper than mutton, cheaper than other kinds of domestic meat. So people are buying saiga meat when they don't have the money to buy anything else. So the idea is if you've got embroidery classes, they're able to sell their embroidery, then their household budget will increase and they'll be able to buy more expensive meat. At the same time, they'll be learning about saigas and seeing saigas as part of their cultural heritage, and therefore their attitudes towards saigas will improve. So women will buy less saiga meat because they've got the money, but also we all know that women wear the trousers in households, and so, my husband's not laughing, women will tell poachers not to poach, because the men listen to the women, they won't poach, and the outcome of all of that is that the saiga population will stabilise. That's the plan. So we did an evaluation of this after it had been going for a couple of years, and we asked both the embroiderers and the adult members of their families what the embroidery clubs were for. This is the outcome. So not very many people said it empowered women. Lots of people said it was a fun activity, preserving traditions. That was one of the things that was the point. And this one here is about saiga hunting reducing. That was the point of the whole thing. So you can see the embroiderers, some of them thought that that was what happened, but none of the wider family thought that was the reason. Basically what we found out was that teenage girls, 16 to 17-year-olds, were coming along, enjoying the hobby, enjoying chatting with their friends. It's a very boring place to live. And, you know, it's great to have a bit of fun. But after they got married, which is the time at which they have some control over their household budget and control over the household, at that point, they were giving it up because their husbands had other things for them to do, and there wasn't enough money being made from it. So based upon that evaluation, we've got a new project starting that's being funded by the UNDP, which is based around a very successful project that's been done for snow leopards for quite a few years, in which you give them an international market, you give them a fair price for their products, but you give them a premium price if there's no poaching. So individuals who don't have any poaching in their families will get a premium price, and groups of embroiderers who have no poaching in their areas will also get a premium, and they'll get that collective payment that they can use for community projects, and they can choose where they spend that money. So this is the first year that we're doing it. They're just having the ceremony probably around now, and one group's got it out of 3. Yeah, we'll see if it works. Oops. Someone in the audience will recognise this. Okay, so we've engaged a few groups. We've got the children, we've got the women. Another important group that you've got to engage are the farmers living out as shepherds on remote areas on the steppe who aren't going to be able to come to Saiga Day, who aren't going to have wives in the villages embroidering. And so the way in which we engaged them was by enlisting them as participatory monitors. So that gives you 2 things. First of all, as I said, saigas live in really remote areas, and we don't necessarily know where they are. We don't have any monitoring. This is Russia. We've got some rangers in there who do monitoring. But these are all the villages where we've had participation monitors. The little saigas are where they've seen them, just in a 3-week period, actually. And it extends enormously our ecological coverage of data. So we just ask them, we pay them a little bit, we ask them to tell us, write down every time they see a saiga, how many there are, that kind of thing. So that's one good thing, you get the ecological data. The other thing is that when you see some hideous nature conservation collapse, you tend to feel very powerless as an individual. What are you supposed to do about it? So by collecting ecological data that they knew they were going to be used, these people felt part of the saiga conservation effort. They felt that they were having an effect, and they started to feel really proud of it. They're very positive about this program. So 2 things: engages people, make people feel ownership of their resources, and get some good data. Here's an illustration of how you can use these data. This is from Russia. This is 5 years of data from our participatory monitoring program. And we were getting quite concerned that we were hearing rumours that there was a really big poaching epidemic in 2012. And actually these data show that very clearly. So you can see small herd sizes, smaller average herd sizes, and fewer sightings of herds, even though we had more monitors. So that was enough to raise the alarm and start saying, look, we've got information that says that poaching is going on based on these monitors. You also have participation monitors in Uzbekistan, and they've been helping us as well. So one of the things is, as I said, saigas migrate south in the winter into Uzbekistan from Kazakhstan and then go back out again. Nobody knew whether saigas stayed there all year round until we had these participation monitors. The red dots up here are summer sightings of saigas in Uzbekistan, and the other colours are winter sightings. This is really important because now the government of Uzbekistan see the saiga as a national animal because it's there all year round. And so they start to invest a bit more and take a bit more seriously. It's not just, oh, this is a Kazakh animal that comes down sometimes. This is our animal. So they're going to do more about it. The other thing is you can show where you should put protected areas. And in fact, they're just doing a new protected area for saigas. And we can show them that up in the northeast is the place to put it because that's where most of the saigas are. The other thing they do is they warn us about poaching. They tell us, give us information. For example, in August last year, without warning, the government of Kazakhstan erected this big border fence between them and Uzbekistan. Even their Minister for the Environment didn't know this was happening. We were the first people to tell their Minister of Environment that that was what was happening, and we told them, based on these photos that were taken by our participation monitors, at some risk to themselves, I have to say. So they told us, we then intervened with the government of Kazakhstan. They've promised to put gaps in and to raise the barbed wire so that saigas can get underneath. This is some satellite monitoring data, so saigas with collars around them that talk to a satellite, tell them where they are. It's a couple of saigas. This is in the summer before they've done the mitigation. See, this one came down, tried to migrate, wandered along the fence a bit, wandered along, finally found a hole and managed to get through. This one's going down, getting through this hole here, trying to get back, and somehow manages it. So they are still going through, but it's not very easy. So that's where we're up to with saigas, but there's always new threats. That's the joy of conservation. There's always something worse around the corner. So one thing that we've seen is climate change. It's starting to have an effect already. So this is some data we analysed from 4 decades of saiga birth areas. The pink is where they gave birth in the 70s. You can see much further south. And the blue is gone further north, quite substantially further north. And we think that this is to do with drying, changing climate and drying. So that's something to look at. Perhaps some of the southern areas are going to become unsuitable for saigas later on. There's still poaching going on. In September, the Chinese government seized 4,470 horns at their customs borders. That happens quite often, so we're helping to train customs officials. As Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan get richer, they're starting to invest in oil and gas and railways and pipelines and all sorts of infrastructure. This here is a picture of planned and current oil and gas pipelines in Kazakhstan. So this one here is planned right through the saiga range. This is one saiga population in Kazakhstan. All the dots are where all the saigas were, and the purple and the yellow are one particular couple of saigas that had collars on, individual trains. This red line here is the planned route of a railway, right through the middle, bisecting it. So by knowing these things, we can start to work with government and with companies to mitigate what they're doing. So planning alternative routes for the railway and helping oil and gas companies to mitigate their damage by doing better things for saigas elsewhere. So hopefully what I've shown you is that seems to me that research is better when it's doing something that's actually going to make a difference. So research that actually answers questions that people want answered, that can make a difference, is what I think is the way to go. But also action, conservation action, needs to be evidence-based. So you need to have the research to underlie what you're saying so that people trust what you're saying. So that's the way that we've been working over the last few years. We've also set up a kind of NGO called the Saiga Conservation Alliance, and that came out of my collaborations with other scientists. And now it's a kind of grassroots organisation doing all these kinds of conservation actions that I showed you about, based in the range states. We've set up all sorts of things with the Saiga Conservation Alliance. So most of the work that I've shown you has been done by my PhD students and my MSc students, and most of it has been in collaboration with these people at the Saiga Conservation Alliance. Conservation is often about doom and gloom, but you should never be gloomy. And in this case particularly, you should not be gloomy, because saigas are pre-adapted to recover. Because they're steppe creatures, they have lots of terrible catastrophic snowfalls, catastrophic droughts. They often die off, and they always bounce back, and they're evolved to do that. So that's why the females give birth in their very first year. They mostly have twins. Populations can recover really quickly. So biologically, we know we can do it. And actually, we've got data to show that we can do it because it all happened before. It happened at the end of the 19th century. So just as English people were going to Africa, killing all the elephants and rhinos, and writing exciting travelogues about that, how great they were shooting things, the Russian Imperial court, people were doing the same thing. We had explorers leaving St. Petersburg, going down to the wilds of Kazakhstan, shooting things, and writing these exciting travelers' tales. So if you look in those, you can get some ideas about what happened. What you can see is at the end of the 19th century, there were many, many saigas, but then they were traded for their horns into China. And you can see these quotes saying, oh, the saigas have gone. It was when the Soviet Union came that, unlike with African animals, there was this kind of respite, I guess, because the border with China was closed, there was no way to trade horns anymore, and the saigas recovered. They recovered from a few thousand to a couple of million in 30 years. We can do that too. And in fact, we've got evidence that it can be done even from now, because in one of the populations where I said the big NGOs have been putting lots of effort along with the government for anti-poaching, this one here in central Kazakhstan has been increasing really fast in the last few years, unlike these other ones where I work, where there's still a lot of poaching going on. So we need to sort it out, but if you sort it out very quickly and easily, the saiga will bounce back. So just to finish off on our philosophy is that governments can't do it alone. Governments can't just protect things like that. Local people need to protect things. Local people want to protect their heritage, then it's going to work. And so you need to work with local people if you want a sustainable future. The only group that we haven't really targeted yet is the one that we're working on now, and that's teenage boys. Teenage boys who are too old for Saiga Day and Steppe Wildlife Club, not just quite started to be poachers. And I've got a master's student out in Kazakhstan right now at this moment who's talking to teenagers, boys and girls, about their hopes and their aspirations for the future, how the saiga and the environment in general fits into those aspirations, and what we can do to help them to fulfill it. And that could be scholarships, it could be skills training, small grants, anything that they want. So starting from what the teenagers want, and then hopefully they won't end up as unemployed young men sitting on the step with nothing to do but kill saigas. Okay, so I just want to finish off by thanking you for listening, but also thanking all the people who've been involved. This has been a group effort from the start. And the people who've been my collaborators in country, my PhD and MSc students, thanks Leja, and also all our sponsors and donors who've stuck with us for all this time. So I think we've got the People's Trust for Endangered Species here in the audience who have stuck with us for a very long time, supported a lot of this work, and others as well. So there's some websites. Thank you very much.